Welcome back, everyone. We're going to be diving into
Hey, everyone, and welcome.
quite a fascinating moment in history today.
Okay.
This is the meeting that happened in the Oval Office between then President Trump,
Right.
his VP Mike Pence, and the Ukrainian President Zelensky. And what's really interesting about this is our source material.
Yeah.
It's not like some news report or, something filtered through, a bunch of editors and things. This is actual footage that was uploaded by C-SPAN on YouTube.
Wow.
So you're really getting a fly-on-the-wall perspective of this high-stakes meeting.
It's remarkable access. You really get to see these personalities and the dynamics between these three leaders.
Yeah.
And one of the things that jumps out right away is Trump lays out this deal right off the bat.
Yeah.
He's talking about U.S. investment in Ukrainian rare earth mineral extraction.
Okay, so, for our listeners who might not be, geology experts or whatever,
Right.
what exactly are rare earth minerals and, why are they so important?
So rare earth minerals are these essential elements that are used in all sorts of high-tech products, everything from smartphones to, weapon systems. So really critical stuff. And Trump's, constantly emphasizing how great this deal would be for the U.S., securing access to these resources.
Yeah.
But it does raise some questions. The U.S. getting involved in resource extraction in a country that's at war.
Yeah. What are the implications of that?
All right. Is it ethical? Are there, security risks involved?
It's a very tangled web for sure.
It is.
You have the potential economic benefit on the one hand,
Right.
but on the other you have this question of, is it even ethical to be making deals like this when there's an active conflict going on?
Exactly. And then you have the added layer of, does this put the U.S. in a more vulnerable position
Yeah.
by getting so deeply involved?
It's really interesting to think about.
And this whole meeting is a really interesting study in contrasts.
Yeah. How so?
Well, you have Trump presenting himself as a peacemaker, someone who can broker deals and end conflicts.
Yeah. I remember him saying, he wanted to, make peace in the Middle East and all this stuff.
Right. But then at the same time,
Yeah.
he's making these provocative statements.
I was going to say, he's not exactly known for his subtlety.
No, not at all.
I mean, at one point, he even jokes about comparing himself to, Washington and Lincoln.
Right.
And he's even predicting how the quote-unquote fake news media is going to spin this whole meeting.
Yeah, it's a very strange mix of, self-assuredness and, I don't know what you would even call it, unconventional diplomacy.
I think that's a good way to put it.
Makes you wonder, is this effective or is this dangerous?
Right. Is he actually trying to de-escalate the situation, or is he, poking the bear, so to speak?
Exactly. And then on the other side of the table, you have Zelensky, who's, in a very desperate situation.
Of course, his country's literally under attack.
Right. And he's there pleading for support.
Yeah.
But while Trump seems very focused on this rare earth mineral deal, Zelensky is trying to really drive home the human cost of this war.
Yeah, I mean, you can really see the difference in their priorities.
Absolutely. There's this really chilling moment where Zelensky talks about how the Russians are treating Ukrainian prisoners of war.
Oh.
And you can just hear the pain in his voice,
Yeah.
the weight of what's happening.
I imagine that would be very difficult to listen to.
It is. And he also points out that, Putin has a history of breaking ceasefires.
Oh, really?
Yeah, which kind of casts doubt on the possibility of any kind of negotiated peace.
Yeah, I mean, if you can't trust the other side to honor an agreement,
Right.
it's hard to see how you can move forward.
Exactly. It's like he's saying, look, this isn't business as usual,
Yeah.
This is about survival.
Yeah, it's a completely different mindset.
And he even goes further and warns that if Ukraine falls, Russia won't stop there.
Oh, wow.
They'll just keep pushing further into Europe, and eventually the U.S. will be forced to get involved anyway.
So he's basically saying that even if you're trying to stay out of it,
that you're going to get dragged in eventually.
right, he's laying out this worst-case scenario, trying to make them understand the stakes.
So you have these two leaders with, very different styles.
Right.
Very different objectives.
Completely.
And that plays out in some pretty interesting ways throughout this meeting.
Oh, absolutely. And it's not just their words, it's their whole demeanor.
Yeah.
Yeah. Zelensky, for example, he's dressed very casually, no suit, no tie.
Oh, yeah, I remember that.
And at one point, he even jokes that he'll wear a suit after the war.
Yeah. What was that all about?
Well, I think it just highlights the cultural and personal differences at play. Zelensky's trying to connect on a human level,
Right.
emphasize the reality of what his people are facing.
Whereas Trump seems more interested in the deal-making aspect, the transactional nature of international relations.
Exactly. And this tension really comes to a head when Pence accuses the Ukrainian delegation of being disrespectful. Oh, yeah. I remember that there's that whole exchange where Zelensky defends his team's right to speak their minds.
Yeah, even if it doesn't align with what the U.S. wants to hear.
It's like this clash of styles. But it also reveals something deeper, I think.
I agree.
It makes you wonder, when you have such fundamentally different approaches to communication and diplomacy,
right,
how do you even find common ground?
Yeah. That's the million-dollar question.
And that actually leads us to another critical issue that comes up in this meeting, U.S. military aid to Ukraine.
Right.
So Trump confirms that the U.S. will continue sending weapons, but he expresses this hope that they won't be necessary because the conflict will be resolved quickly.
Yeah.
But then you have Zelensky, on the other hand, who's pushing for these strong security guarantees from the U.S.,
right,
essentially a promise of long-term support and protection.
Exactly. And he argues that Europe can't provide that on its own. They need the U.S. backing.
So once again, you have these contrasting viewpoints.
Right.
Trump hoping for a swift resolution. Zelensky needing that long-term commitment.
Yeah.
And it really raises some questions about, the U.S. role in this conflict.
Definitely. Are we acting in our own self-interest, or are we truly committed to helping Ukraine?
It's tough because, you have these ethical implications
of course,
of providing military aid.
Right. Is it fueling the violence, or is it helping a country defend itself?
It's a lot to unpack.
It is. But this meeting gives us such a fascinating glimpse into all of these factors.
Yeah.
The personalities involved, the complexities of international diplomacy.
Yeah, it's a raw, unfiltered look at, a pivotal moment in history.
Absolutely. And it forces us to confront some uncomfortable truths about power and conflict and the choices we make as a nation.
It does, but, we're only scratching the surface here.
Right.
So we're going to dive even deeper into all of this in part 2.
So we left off talking about this idea of U.S. military aid.
Right.
The short term versus the long term.
Exactly. And Zelensky really makes this argument that the U.S. needs to be involved for the long haul.
Yeah.
He's saying if Ukraine falls, Russia's not going to just stop there.
Right.
They're going to keep going, and it could lead to, a much bigger conflict.
He's painting a pretty grim picture.
He is, but is it realistic, or is he exaggerating a bit, to make sure the U.S. stays committed?
It's hard to say.
I mean, it's possible he's playing on their fears a little bit.
Yeah.
But even if he is, it shows just how precarious their situation is.
Right. They're caught between this aggressor and then all these global power dynamics.
Exactly. Like they're stuck in the middle of this giant chess game.
Yeah. And the U.S. has to decide what its next move is.
Right. And it's not an easy decision.
No, not at all.
Because on the one hand, you want to help a democracy that's being attacked.
Right.
But on the other hand, you don't want to provoke Russia and maybe start a bigger war.
It's a real dilemma.
It is. And it reminds us that foreign policy is rarely simple.
Definitely not.
There are always risks and trade-offs and unintended consequences.
Absolutely. So it's not just about, abstract ideas or strategies. It's about real people's lives.
Exactly. And that brings us back to this whole debate about military aid. Is it ethical to provide weapons even if it means the conflict might go on longer?
Yeah. I mean, some people say it's necessary to help Ukraine defend itself.
Right.
But others worry that it's just adding fuel to the fire.
And this meeting really puts those dilemmas front and center.
Yeah.
It makes us think about the messy realities of international relations.
It does. And speaking of messy realities, remember how Zelensky was dressed during this whole meeting?
Oh, yeah. He was very casual.
Yeah. And then a reporter even asked him about it.
Right. And his response was great.
What did he say again?
He said he'd put on a suit after the war.
It was such a simple statement, but it said so much.
I know, right? It was like he was saying, look, I'm dealing with a life or death situation here.
Right. Clothes are the least of his worries.
Exactly. It was a moment of humor in this really tense meeting.
Yeah.
And it showed a lot about his personality.
It did. It was very different from Trump's style.
Absolutely. Much less formal.
But then things got serious again when Pence brought up the issue of free speech in Ukraine.
Right. He mentioned that blogger who had been arrested for criticizing the government.
Yeah. And it made you wonder about Zelensky's commitment to democracy.
Right. Especially while he's fighting this war.
I mean, it's a valid point.
It is.
Because, sometimes in a crisis, individual rights can take a back seat.
Right. It's that whole tension between national unity and individual freedom.
Yeah. And it's a reminder that even leaders we might support aren't perfect.
Of course not.
They make mistakes. They have flaws.
And we need to hold them accountable.
We do, even as we offer our support.
Exactly. It's about finding that balance.
Right. Acknowledging the challenges, but also sticking to our principles.
And it all ties back to this idea of the ethical implications of U.S. involvement.
Yeah, we have to be careful about who we support
Definitely.
and what the consequences might be.
And this meeting is full of these kinds of discussions.
It's not just a photo op or a chance to shake hands.
Right. These are real issues.
And you can see how the personalities involved are really shaping things.
It's a rare look behind the scenes.
It is. And it makes you think about the U.S. role in the world.
Absolutely. And the complexities of conflict resolution.
And the human cost of it all.
It's a lot to process.
It is, but we're not done yet. So we're back. And I think, it's easy to get caught up in like the strategy and the politics of all this.
Right.
But this meeting really brings it back to the human element.
It does.
Zelensky's not just some president. He's a father. He's a husband. He's a, citizen of a country that's under attack.
Right.
And you can hear that weight on him.
Yeah. The desperation.
Yeah, as he's pleading for help.
Absolutely. I mean, can you imagine being in his shoes?
It's hard to even fathom.
And yet, even with all that pressure, he doesn't give up hope.
No, he doesn't.
There's this resilience there, this determination that's incredible.
Yeah, and he even, makes those little jokes.
Right, like the suit thing.
Exactly. It's like even in the darkest of times,
the
human spirit can still come through.
And I think it speaks to his leadership style, too.
Yeah.
He's not afraid to be himself.
No.
To connect with people on a human level.
Even when he's talking to, the most powerful people in the world.
It's so different from Trump's approach.
Yeah, much more personal.
Definitely. And we saw that difference play out in a lot of ways.
Right. Their body language, their clothes.
Yeah, even just the way they talk.
But it goes deeper than that. Remember when Pence brought up that blogger who was arrested?
Oh, yeah.
It really makes you think about, what we're willing to overlook.
Right. Are we supporting democracy or are we just supporting our own interests?
That's a tough question.
It is, and there's no easy answer.
But this meeting forces us to ask those questions.
It does.
So as we wrap up here, what are some key takeaways for our listeners?
Well, I think the first one is that things are never simple.
Right.
In international relations, there are always shades of gray.
We can't just think in black and white.
No, we have to look at all sides of the story.
And be critical thinkers.
Absolutely. And hold our leaders accountable.
I think that's really important.
The other thing is that individuals can make a huge difference.
Yeah, Zelensky is a good example of that.
He really has.
His courage, his honesty, it's inspiring.
And finally, I think we have to remember the human cost of all this.
That's so important.
It's easy to get lost in the politics.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, there are real people suffering.
We can't forget that.
No, we can't.
Well said.
Thank you.
And on that note, a huge thank you to all our viewers for joining us for this deep dive.
We really appreciate your support.
If you enjoyed this and you want to see more content like it, don't forget to subscribe and give us a like.
And if you're watching on another platform, come find us on YouTube.
Just search for FMKE News.
We've got tons of great content there. Everything from politics to sports to spiritual matters to in-depth research.
We're incredibly grateful for all of you. Your views, your likes, your shares, your comments, they mean the world to us.
They really do.
So thank you for being a part of this community.
We'll see you next time.
And until then, stay curious and keep exploring the world around you.